Part 57. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 561. Chapter 561. The evil slave deceives the master. No, your majesty. The Marquis was about to object, but was interrupted by the emperor waving his hand. Cousin, there is no need to say any more, I have made up my mind. The Marquis sighed, thought for a while and said, then if someone asks, the emperor will definitely say that it was me who suggested this matter. The emperor smiled and said, my cousin is entering the palace today, and I will recruit the children of aristocratic families to join the army. I am afraid that if I don't say this, everyone will guess the culprit. Mr. Ho also smiled, yeah, I'm confused too. After chatting for a few more words, the Marquis said, Fu Niu is still in the house, I'll go back first. The emperor thought of the basket of cantaloupes and immediately said, Suzhou donated a lot of good materials the day before yesterday. I picked some and took them back to make dresses for Fu Niu. The Marquis was not polite at all and responded, thank you, your majesty. Mr. Yi came in with a very eye-catching look, smiled and led the Marquis out. There were young eunuchs and palace maids who wanted to serve the emperor for new tea, but the emperor waved them away. The emperor walked around the room with his hands behind his back, calculating the number of descendants of each family and which family could extract more money. Although he was worried just now, once he decided to do something, he would not go back on it. What's more, he is the emperor and worries about the emptiness of the treasury every day, while those wealthy families are extravagant and live in drunken dreams. Since they enjoy blessings that the common people cannot enjoy, they naturally have to endure the same hardships as the common people. Halfway through the calculation, he suddenly froze for a moment, then started laughing. He couldn't help but whisper, cousin, it's still the same cousin, he really hasn't changed. Master Ho took a dozen horses of good stuff, got into the carriage, and went all the way back to the Ho mansion. In the eyes of the officials waiting to be summoned outside the palace gate, they couldn't help but be envious. Someone said, I am afraid that the Marquis of Xinting will soon be called the Duke of Xinting. It is really rare for the emperor to have such trust. Yes, Xinting Hao controls an army of tens of thousands. This time he is victorious and triumphant. The emperor is naturally more favored, another official also echoed. But some people said sourly, I heard that there were a lot of casualties in this expedition. We injured 1,000 enemies and lost 800. That can be considered a victory. Such a victory achieved with human lives can be achieved by anyone who leads the army win. The words didn't sound right. The other two people didn't dare to get involved, so they quickly changed their words. Not to mention that they were talking a lot, but that the Marquis's carriage left in front of the palace gate. The Marquis slowly closed the car window when he saw the eaves of the palace disappearing from sight. People, only the friendship in childhood is the purest. As we grow up, this friendship will always change. That 6-year-old prince's cousin will trust him wholeheartedly. But the emperor's cousin, who is sitting on Tianwu, will be suspicious of him and will be on guard. So, just leave things like friendship in the past. At any time, you still have to look at the interests. Just like today, the benefits are enough, even the emperor is willing to be used to help him clean up the Wu family. In the main courtyard of the Ho mansion, there were dozens of account books piled up, and the shopkeepers and stewards of each shop were waiting outside the door. In the room, Ji Yan brought Shui Ling and Shui Yun, as well as the butler, who had been doing calculations for half an hour. Finally, 5 account books were selected. Ji Yan said, Uncle Steward, there is something wrong with these account books. The amounts are wrong. At least one of them is off by more than 200 taels. The chief steward had just finished accounting one of them, and now he looked really bad. He usually beats these stewards and shopkeepers frequently, fearing that they will become greedy. Moreover, the wages paid to them by the Marquis are very high, and at the end of the year, the shop will receive a 100% dividend. Who would have thought that they would still do such a stupid thing? With a dark face, he walked to the door and called all the shopkeepers and stewards into the room, and then called out the 5 shopkeepers whose account books had problems. The 5 shopkeepers had something on their minds and naturally looked weak, but when they saw a young girl sitting at the head of the table, they emboldened themselves again. If they confront the Marquis, they will immediately ask for mercy and atonement. But a little girl, they still have a chance. One of the shopkeepers smiled dryly and was the first to ask, "Princess, do you have something to tell me?" "Yes," Jian responded simply, took a piece of snack, and said while eating, "There are 380 taels missing from your account book. You can spit it out. When your adoptive father comes back, I will plead for you. No, I'll beat you up and let you go home to retire." The shopkeeper turned dark and retorted coldly, "The princess is joking. The old slave has been working for the Marquis for 13 years. The shopkeeper has also been working for 13 years, and there has never been a problem in the account books. Why did the princess come out after checking the accounts? Problem. If the princess doesn't like the old slave and wants to change someone to be the shopkeeper, just say so. As long as the Marquis nods, the old slave will give up his position immediately." How presumptuous! When the chief steward heard this, he stared at the shopkeeper and scolded the shopkeeper loudly, "Who gave you the courage to talk to the princess like this? The Marquis has already given instructions that everything in the home mansion is decided by the princess. The princess wants to replace you, so why make such an excuse? That's not certain. After all, the princess's surname is not yet. She probably wants to replace the old slave and find someone named Li to take over. The shopkeeper is also a tough guy. Maybe he relies on his seniority and speaks hard. Everyone originally thought that the princess would get angry or cry with anger. After all, she is a child and cannot be as calm as an adult. But they all guessed wrong. The princess was still smiling and eating snacks, not angry at all. She raised her hand, picked up the account book with 2 fingers, threw it to the shopkeeper, and said, "On page 20, the balance is 18 taels and 6 cents, but when the last page is counted, it becomes 12 cents and 6 cents. Then where did the 8 taels of silver go?" The shopkeeper's expression changed. He took the account book but did not open it. He replied, "Maybe the old slave was blinded and saw something wrong. I saw it wrong once, I saw it wrong twice, could it be that I saw it wrong 10 times? Jian patted the snack dregs on his hand, looked at him seriously, and said, "Okay, even if you saw it wrong, it is possible. But you are the person in charge of the restaurant, said eggs cost 3 cents each in summer. Why did your purchase bill cost 5 cents each? It's impossible to buy more, but it's more expensive, right? It's not just eggs, but also pork, mutton, fresh fish, and the prices of all kinds of vegetables are much higher. How do you explain that?" The shopkeeper finally realized that he was afraid. He had been doing this for several years by falsely reporting purchase bills and making a profit from it. He did not expect that he would be picked on by a child of several years old. This. He couldn't find an excuse for the moment, but Jian couldn't bear to waste more words with him. "Since it's shameless to give face, then don't give it. Uncle Steward, give this man 20 blows and tie him up until his adoptive father comes back to deal with him." "Yes, Princess." The chief steward was also angry. These people would slap him in the face again for doing such a stupid thing. As he was talking, a guard was called to see him. He grabbed the shopkeeper's arm and dragged him out. The other shopkeepers were frightened and their faces turned pale. Just at this time, the Marquis came back from the palace. The shopkeeper seemed to have seen a savior, and rushed towards him. "Master Marquis, save this old slave, the princess wants to kill him." End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 562. Chapter 562, The name is not right and the words are not right. The housekeeper was anxious, fearing that the Marquis would listen to the slander and misunderstand the princess. He was about to step forward to explain, but without even looking at the shopkeeper, he kicked him a few feet away and strode into the house. Jian said with a smile, "Father, you are back. Have you had lunch?" "No, I came here to eat with you." The Marquis smiled and rubbed the fat girl's hair, and discussed with her, "I haven't eaten cyclamen for a long time, do you want to go there for lunch?" "Okay, uncle is not here, my adoptive father and I will go and support my second brother." Jian was so smart that she guessed the intention of the Marquis at once. My adoptive father is the god of war, and bad guys are afraid of him, so they don't dare to bully his second brother. The Marquis shaved her little nose and said with a smile, "Ghost spirit, I really can't hide anything from you. Are you tired of checking the account books? The Emperor has rewarded you with several pieces of new material. You can pick and choose the ones you like and let the embroiderer make them into dresses, and take the rest back and share them with your family members." "Okay," Jian responded quickly. "Grandma had to prepare gifts earlier, but there was no material in the warehouse, so I just left some extra for Grandma." The two men spoke happily as if there was no one else around, which completely reassured the chief steward. But it also frightened all the shopkeepers. They had heard before that the Marquis treated the adopted daughter of the princess differently and loved her more than his own daughter. But after seeing it with their own eyes today, they realized that she was closer to a daughter than a real daughter. The restaurant owner was holding his stomach and half lying in the yard, feeling even more chilled. He originally wanted to confuse right and wrong, start with the fact that the princess's surname is Li and not Ye, and try to overturn the verdict for himself. But now it is obvious that his plan was in vain. However, he didn't want to be defeated by a little girl, so he struggled and climbed up the steps again. He shouted loudly, "Master Ho, this old slave is Bai Sangzing. He has been managing the restaurant for the Ho mansion for more than 10 years. I have no merit but hard work. Master Ho, just listen to what the old slave has to say. Master Ho, this old slave is unjustly accused. This old slave cannot bear to see Master Ho being robbed of his family property. This old slave will not rest in peace until his death." The Marquis frowned, turned to look at him, and sneered, "You have managed the restaurant for the Ho mansion for more than 10 years, but the Ho mansion has also paid you wages for more than 10 years and shared the dividends for more than 10 years. Where did you get it? Isn't it your duty to work hard?" Shopkeeper Bai was stunned for a moment, then started to cry again, "Master Ho, this old slave is just a dim-sighted person who misread the number, so that the general ledger couldn't match it up, so the princess wrongfully accused the old slave of embezzling money. And in autumn and winter, eggs and vegetables are much more expensive." The princess said that the old slave had done something wrong in the purchase. The old slave was wronged. "Master Marquis, if the princess wants to kick this old slave out and replace him with the Li family, even if he says it clearly, he should not let this old slave bear such a bad name. He will not be willing to die." Jian didn't want to speak at first, but now she had to speak. "Why are you telling lies with your eyes wide open? You entered the wrong numbers 10 times in an account book. In June, you actually spent 3 times more than usual on buying eggs. The price is still in autumn and winter, but June is considered autumn and winter in your house." The Marquis patted the back, like soothing a kitten with fried fur, and finally asked shopkeeper Bai, "You said that the princess deliberately framed you and arranged for the Li family to your position?" "Yes, Lord Marquis." Shopkeeper Bai had no way out and said bravely. The housekeeper wanted to explain again, but the Marquis nodded and said to shopkeeper Bai, "What you said reminds me that the shop is not under the princess's name. It is indeed unfair for her to manage it in the future." Having said that, he ordered the steward, "Go to the government office tomorrow and transfer all the shops to the name of the princess." Everyone gasped when they heard this. Shopkeeper Bai opened his mouth wide and his throat was staring at the sky. There are more than 30 shops in the Marquis mansion, both inside and outside Kyoto. Just give it all to the princess. The home mansion will not be able to survive in the future. Especially the several shopkeepers who also had problems with their account books were simply devastated. The four of them looked at each other and knelt down. One of them took the lead and said, "Master Marquis, we are obsessed with tampering with the account books and overwriting the money. We are willing to return all the money and only ask the Marquis to spare our lives." The Marquis glanced at them and said, "You can avoid the death penalty, but you cannot escape the living penalty. After the compensation is paid, each of you will receive 20 pieces of money. You are allowed to redeem yourselves and get out of the new capital with your whole family." These shopkeepers are all slaves of the home mansion. Some have signed death deeds, some have signed long-term employment contracts for 20 years, and there is even a whole family of servants of the home mansion. With their backs against a big tree, they can enjoy the shade. As stewards and shopkeepers of the Marquis mansion, they have never been bullied outside. They just have to think about it. Taking off the amulet of the Marquis mansion and living the lives of ordinary people is like walking in the cold winter snow without their cotton-padded clothes. But the wrong thing has been done, and it is too late to regret it now. The four of them kowtowed to the ground and obediently retreated to receive their boards. Shopkeeper Bai felt bad when he heard the screams in the yard. He still wanted to talk, but the Marquis had already ordered the chief steward, "Call this person's whole family, ask if there is anything else, and then deal with it and sell the whole family." "Yes, Lord Marquis," the chief steward responded, waved his hand and called 2 guards to come forward, grabbed Shopkeeper Bai and left. Shopkeeper Bai struggled desperately and wanted to speak, but was knocked off the scabbard and passed out. The rest of the shopkeepers who had no problem stood aside with their heads down, like quails, not daring to take a breath. The steward asked tentatively, "Master Marquis, who is the right person to take charge of these 5 shops?" The Marquis looked at Jiyan and said, "The princess will decide." Jiyan tilted her head, kicked her calves, thought for a while and said, "For these 5 shops, let the former shopkeepers' deputies take over. Within a month, if they can support the shops, they will be officially promoted. The shopkeepers of the other shops are loyal and diligent and will be rewarded with an extra month's wages." "Okay, that's it." The Marquis nodded and motioned for everyone to leave. The shopkeepers quickly bowed respectfully and thanked them, and then left one after another. Seeing that there were no outsiders in the room, the butler couldn't hold it any longer, so he gestured with his thumbs and exaggerated the good news, "Princess, you were so powerful just now, and you handled it so well." Jiyan quietly glanced outside the door, then patted his chest and said with a smile, "I was really scared to death just now. It's good that I didn't make a mistake." "No, no, the princess handled it very well. These shopkeepers are like donkeys. They can't be led and they will go backwards. They need to be beaten more in the future, otherwise they will easily make mistakes." The chief steward found a good excuse, climbed up the pole quickly, and begged with a grimace, "Princess, can you come to the Marquis' mansion more times in the future, even twice a month? The Marquis is often not at home, although the old slave is a housekeeper, he is also a servant. The princess often comes and goes, so that the people in the house can stay together." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 563. Chapter 563 3 Women and 1 Drama. Before the good news could be heard, the Marquis spoke first. "Funiur will come every 5 days from now on, and she will go into the city with your mother. My adoptive father is not at home, so you can take care of the favors for my adoptive father. Check the shop's incoming and outgoing accounts at the end of every month. If the shop needs to be adjusted, just make bold arrangements. Father, I don't know how, Ji-yin quickly waved her hand. This time, it's not that she wants to be lazy, she actually has no experience in managing such a large mansion and family business. Recalling the ownership of the shops, she added, also, adoptive father, please don't transfer those shops to my name. You have already given me a lot of things. The Marquis shook his head and insisted, it's not difficult to be a master. If you don't understand anything, the housekeeper can teach you. As for the shop, it's in your name for easy management. If I need it in the future, it won't be difficult to change it back. What good news can I say? The adoptive father has made up his mind to buy and sell by force. The chief steward was very discerning and quickly brought over the materials that were rewarded by the palace. He greeted the good news warmly, Princess, come and choose. I think this Yongxia brocade is the best for a quilted coat. Although it's still hot now, it will be cold in 2 months. The old slave asked the embroidery room to spend some time making a few sets of dresses for the princess to meet guests. There is no woman who doesn't love beauty, especially clothes and jewelry. She has no resistance at all. Ji-yin was attracted by the brocades that filled his eyes. He couldn't help but come forward and said, Uncle housekeeper, I have painted some different styles of clothes. Please call 2 embroiderers over for me. I want to talk to them. Okay, the housekeeper quickly called the maid to the sewing room and called the 2 leading ladies over. The style Ji-yin came up with this time is a new style with a pipa collar and a semi-stand collar. She plans to make a coat and skirt for her grandma. When the 2 nuns saw Mr. Ho present, they wanted to do their best to show off their professional skills. After all, there is only one master in the house, and he is still away from home all year round. They are really worried about being idle, and they are afraid that they will be downsized and sold. The Marquis was disturbed by the fact that 3 women were performing a play, so he ordered the butler to go to the warehouse and bring over half of the materials suitable for women, so that the good news could be chosen and used as he pleased. If there is anything left, load it into a car and send it to Li's house. The housekeeper agreed, and the Marquis went to the study to deal with some documents. When the sun rose above the head, the 2 nuns brought a lot of brocade and fabrics and returned to the embroidery room with satisfaction. Ji-yin rubbed her rumbling belly and jumped up and down to find her adoptive father. Just in time, the Marquis had finished his work. After the father and daughter reunited, they went straight to cyclamen. At this time, it is lunchtime, and cyclamen is the busiest time. But I don't know whether it was because of Li Zhenzhen's absence or the hot weather, but the attendance at cyclamen was lower than before. There are a total of 10 tables in the lobby, but only 7 are occupied. There are also free rooms in the private rooms upstairs. Jie Huan walked around in the lobby, feeling a little worried. Uncle is not at home, he has not taken care of the business. At this time, the Marquis entered the door with good news. The Marquis was dressed in a brocade gown the color of the rain, with a jade belt wrapped around his waist, and his black hair tied with a jade hairpin. He is tall, handsome, and has a calm expression. He is a presence that people can spot at a glance no matter where he stands. Ji-yin wore a pink slanted-breasted shirt today, paired with an ivory white pleated skirt. There was no embroidery on the skirt and skirt corners, and was only trimmed with soybean-sized pearls. It was unique and beautiful. There were 2 small flower buds on her head, 2 pearl strings, and a red gold necklace with 8 treasures hanging on her neck. It set off her fair and round little face, and she looked so happy and cute no matter how she looked. Everyone subconsciously stopped their chopsticks and looked over, wondering where this noble man came from. He was so outstanding, the family was delighted to see him, but they were extremely happy. They hurriedly came forward and said, Master Ho, Fu Niuer, what are you doing, coming? Ji-yin smiled and held her brother's hand and said, My adoptive father said that my uncle is not at home, so he brought me to support my second brother and see if anyone bullies my second brother. The family laughed honestly, touched her sister's hair, and said to Mr. Ho, "Don't worry, Mr. Ho, everything is fine. It's just that I'm not as busy as before. I'm thinking about introducing 2 new dishes." The Marquis nodded and replied, "Let's cook some dishes first. Fu Niu is hungry." "Okay, Lord Marquis, come with me to the backyard room, it's quiet there." Jie Huan quickly took his sister and led the Marquis back. The Marquis looked around at everyone in the lobby, nodded slightly as a greeting, and then went to the backyard. The lobby was quiet for a moment, then suddenly became lively. "Who is this person? I haven't heard that we all have such an outstanding person." One of the guests shouted first, and then his companions laughed at him. "You actually don't know Xinting Hao?" "That's Xinting Hao, who just returned in triumph." The companion was very excited and shouted in a low voice. The person who was laughed at was unconvinced and retorted, "Didn't you say that Marquis Xinting is not married? This man just now had his daughter." His companion no longer wanted to be associated with such a fool, and said feebly, "The Marquis of Xinting is not married and has no children, but have you forgotten that he has an adopted daughter? That is Princess Kangol, Princess Kangol." Others also said, "Yes, that is Princess Kangol, and she is called the second brother of Boss Xiao Li. It is definitely correct. It is said that the Marquis and the Li family are very close to each other, but I still don't believe it. I saw it with my own eyes today and realized that this is not an ordinary close relationship. The Marquis has such a cold temper, and he actually came to support Mr. Li." An old man stroked his beard and said with a strange expression, "I don't know whether he is envious of the Li family, or whether he feels that the Marquis is lowering his status by doing this. Of course, no matter what they think, it is their business." There is a side room in the backyard, which is very clean. It is where Jie Huan and Li Zhenshen usually stay. Most of the time when family members come over, they rest here. In the house, as soon as you enter the door, there is a small kong on the inside that can accommodate 4 or 5 people. There is a large square table placed near the window. It is very convenient for organizing account books, reading and writing, and setting meals after tidying up. There is a high stool in the corner, and there is a pot of camellia that is blooming vigorously. It is not a rare species, but it is better because the flowers crowd the branches, gorgeous and beautiful. Jie Huan took the snack box, called the boy to deliver tea, and then went to cook the stove herself. At this time, it happened that Li Laoer also came over. It turned out that he had just returned from the relief department and thought there was nothing to eat in Baiwen Garden, so he came over to take a look. "Second uncle, why are you here?" "My adoptive father and I said that we would go see you and see the flowers after we have eaten." Ji Yin greeted the second uncle, poured tea for him, and took 2 pieces of chenbai cake. Li Laoer was also really hungry. He ate up the chenbai cake in 2 mouthfuls, and then he smiled and said to the Marquis, "If the Marquis is not coming, I would also like to find an opportunity to talk to the Marquis." "What a coincidence, so am I." The Marquis smiled. "I went into the palace to make 2 arrangements with the Emperor this morning, and I was planning to talk to you about it." End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 564. Chapter 564. The punishment given to the Wu family is still too light. Hearing this, Li Laoer immediately asked Zheng He and Zheng Feng to guard the door. "This house has no rear window, so I'm not afraid of people eavesdropping from behind." Li Laoer told Wang Zekin that he was trying to find faults with the Li family everywhere, and that he made a stupid move and sabotaged Baiwen Garden. He exposed it on the spot and lost all face. Finally, he added, "Nowadays, although there are Mr. Haiheng and Mr. Wen in the court, Haiheng is responsible for planting corn and potatoes and is often away from home. Mr. Wen is the censor. It is not easy to openly stand in line when something happens. He has lost his neutrality. Fair. And you and Lao Si are on an expedition, and there must be no one in the government to support you and speak out for you. Therefore, I am thinking about getting a position of real power. Unfortunately, I have no scientific examinations and no fame, but Baiwan Garden happened to be opened and I donated some food and medicinal materials to the relief agency. I found that the relief agency was like psoriasis on a person's head. It didn't affect life or death, but it was extremely ugly and no one dared to touch it. But if it was run well, it would be a good step forward, so I bravely took it. Although we have money and food allocated by the court now, we are still short of money. We still need to sell flowers every month to raise money and food to supplement some, but things should get better before winter. When the time comes, I will take the young and old from the relief department to sweep snow on the streets and do simple tasks. Of course, these are not the most important things. The most important thing is. Li Lauer stopped here. The Marquis understood and said with a smile, the most important thing is the omnipresent eyes. It is the reputation of the Li family for being perfect and loyal among the emperor, the courtiers, and the people. Li Lauer immediately burst into laughter. I knew the Marquis would definitely guess what I was thinking. The Marquis nodded, raised his hand to refill his tea, and said in a low voice, actually, every wealthy family probably has manpower secretly. Even our family has several taverns or grocery stores in the market, which can come in handy at critical moments. Hearing the good news on the other side, he suddenly realized that when he checked the account books in the morning, there were indeed account books for several taverns and grocery stores, but the shopkeepers were not there. She was also surprised that such a small business only had a monthly profit of more than a dozen taels, so why was the Marquis still involved in it? It turned out that it was not for making money, but just as the eyes, ears, and mouth of the prince. Li Lauer was envious when he heard this. The wealth accumulated by wealthy families over the years has never been about gold, silver, and property, but more about connections and trump cards. Speaking of which, the Li family is really lucky. The Wang family was able to win against the Wang family before because, first of all, Li Zhenzhen's living evidence of crime was here, and the Wang family was irrefutable. Secondly, the hatred that the Li family has been suffering for 20 years made the Li family risk everything and caused a storm in the city. Even the emperor in the palace knew that it was impossible for the Wang family to do anything. Thirdly, the Wang family will also have to worry about the Marquis. Therefore, due to various reasons, the Wang family was beaten back step by the Li family in full view of the public, unable to raise their heads. Otherwise, it would be extremely easy for a behemoth like the Wang family to cover up their own scandals and dispose of the Li family quietly. This is also the fundamental reason why Mrs. Wang fell ill and Mr. Wang went crazy. They are so frustrated. It's like a lion facing a rabbit. It can kill the rabbit in one bite, but it can't bite it. Instead, the rabbit kicks it into ashes. Even now, I still have to endure this rabbit jumping happily in front of my eyes every day. The Li family achieved an impossible victory, and the Wang family experienced an impossible humiliation. Thinking through these details, Li Lauer was really scared. The ignorant are fearless. Fortunately, he woke up and began to make up for the shortcomings of the Li family. He began to catch up, hoping to make up for these gaps as soon as possible. The sheep are not dead yet, and repairs have already begun. Master Ho drank tea slowly and took another piece of snack and put it in the palm of the fat girl's hand. He didn't say anything and gave Li Lauer enough time to think. The Li family has jumped from a small peasant family to a powerful class. There are many detours to go along the way. They even have to bump into each other and have to wrestle. This is inevitable. In his opinion, the Li family has been lucky enough and worked hard enough, and the rest is only a matter of time, and there is no rush. As expected, Li Lauer figured it out, let out a sigh of relief, stood up and saluted the Marquis. Thank you, Master Marquis. You must have secretly protected our family many times before. The Marquis pulled him to sit down and said with a smile, "My family, there's no need to be polite. If I hadn't been rescued by your family when I was in trouble, the grass on my grave would have been 3 feet high now. This is the good karma your family has planted and it has ended up here. Good results." After saying that, he rubbed the fat girl's hair, remembering that at that time, the fat girl could not speak, so she would trade with him, with one hand of silver and the other of pills. There was a bit more warmth and endearment in his smile. At this time, Jie Huan brought a tray and delivered the food himself. Everyone helped to set it up, and my family didn't need to be polite at all, so I started eating with chopsticks. Jie Huan gave her sister half a bowl of vegetables, picked out a piece of fish, and went back to the kitchen to get busy. Jiyan called him and asked, "Second brother, are you going home tonight?" Jie Huan shook his head and replied, "You can't get away from here. Let's go back tomorrow night." Jiyan thought about her sister-in-law who was so happy that she was vomiting at home, so she said, "Second brother, you should go home. My mother and I have thought up 2 new dishes, and we just want to teach you and put them on the menu." Seriously, Jie Huan was so excited. Okay, I will definitely go back at night. Don't forget to buy Chen and Jiaji's pickled plums for your second sister-in-law, she likes to eat these recently, Jiyan reminded with a smile. Jie Huan blushed, but he still agreed, "Don't worry, I'll remember it." Li Laoer took a piece of meat to his niece, and she liked it very much. Fu Niu eats meat and has lost weight recently. Would you like me to go back and tell your grandma to reduce your homework? No, second Uncle Jiyan's mouth was oily after eating, and she responded vaguely while struggling with the braised pig's trotters, "If a young man doesn't work hard, the old man will be miserable. I will learn these first, and I will add painting and painting later. Play the piano. Yes, and practice martial arts." Li Laoer felt distressed when he heard this, so he teased his little niece, "You have to get up early to practice martial arts. You have to start practicing before dawn." "Ah, so early," sure enough, good news immediately backed down, "then I'd better wait a few more years. If I don't get enough sleep, I won't be able to grow taller." Li Laoer and Mr. Ho couldn't help laughing. This lazy girl has too many excuses. The Marquis took a clean cloth from the table and wiped the lazy girl's mouth and hands. Thinking of the third princess in the palace, he said, "You must learn martial arts. At least when others bully you, you can fight back directly. It doesn't matter if you are injured or even killed. Of course, your adoptive father and family will take care of you. But just remember, you must not be bullied or hurt, do you understand?" If these words were heard by Mrs. Li and Tao Hongying, they would probably laugh and cry again and say that they had taught their children bad things. What a pity, the person sitting next to me is Mr. Li. He had the same idea, and had already told his niece this long ago. At this moment, he also said, "Like the last time I entered the palace, the queen locked you in a dark room. You should cry to death and let the entire harem know that the queen bullied the children. Why should she be embarrassed? Everyone in Zindu knows it, so it's better for you to keep silent." Dark room, Mr. Ho put down his chopsticks immediately, his face as dark as ink. Before, when talking about the good news, I talked about this section lightly. Yashin and Dongmei didn't follow them into the palace, and they didn't know the specific situation, and they didn't explain it in detail. So much so that Lord Marquis knew it now, and he said coldly, "It seems that the punishment I arranged for the Wu family is still light." End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 565. Chapter 565 Either Pay or Fight. After hearing this, Li Laoer asked, "Is this why the Marquis came to the palace today?" Jiyan was afraid that her adoptive father would lose his sense of control because of her, so she quickly said, "Father, don't be angry, I'm not afraid. That little dark room at the edge of the garden is where hoes and shovels are stored. It's not scary at all. Besides, I've only waited half a minute. In an hour, Uncle Juan came to save me. Master Ho took a deep breath, not wanting this sensible fat girl to worry, so he patted her on the back and said, "My foster father knew better than to teach the Wu family a lesson, not just because you were bullied. The Wu family has tried many times to send people to the Marquis mansion, and forced me to get married through the Queen. I shouldn't have tolerated it at that time, so now they are even more serious." Li Lao advised with some worry, "Master Ho, after all, the Wu family has the support of the Queen." The Marquis shook his head and sneered, "Not to mention a childless queen, even if there is a prince by her side, for the sake of the military power in my hand, I should be more polite to Fu Niuer. But this family of idiots jumped out to fight on their own. Then don't blame me for taking action on the Wu family." Li Lao was helpless and knew that he could no longer persuade him, so he said, "Then what are you going to do?" The Marquis replied, "Soon, the Emperor will issue a decree to recruit soldiers. They will not recruit people from the common people, but the children of the noble families and civil and military officials. 2 people in a family must have 1 legitimate son." Li Lao's eyes widened immediately upon hearing this, and he had an intuition in his heart that this matter would cause an uproar, and the entire new capital would be stirred up. He hesitated and said, "Master Marquis, I am afraid that the nobles of the family and the civil and military officials will object." The Marquis nodded and sneered, "Of course, they will definitely not agree. Their children and grandchildren are extremely valuable, and they definitely don't want to send them to the north of the Yangtze River to kill the barbarians. They just want to stay in the south of the Yangtze River and live in a dream. But how can things in this world go as planned? Nothing can be done. How can you enjoy wealth by giving? If they don't want to risk their lives, then give them money. The children and grandchildren of the people can kill the barbarians on their behalf and bleed and sacrifice, but they can't not even get the pension." "Yes, Mr. Ho is right, it should be like this." Li Lao's blood boiled when he heard it, and he said in a suppressed voice, "They can buy a famous flower with hundreds of tails without blinking, so naturally they can also take a few. 1,000 taels pay for the lives of your children and grandchildren." The Marquis' expression softened a bit and he said, "If anyone asks you where you are and wants to make accommodations with me, just mention a few words about the pension." "Understood," Li Lao immediately agreed and picked up the tea bowl. "I will use tea instead of wine. Thank you Lord Marquis for seeking justice for the people and bringing peace to Tianwu." "I'm coming too." Jiyan didn't have a tea bowl, so she picked up the rice bowl at hand and stood with her second uncle in a dignified manner. "Fu Niuer thanks her adoptive father for fighting for the country and the people. His adoptive father is the god of war. He is a great hero." The Marquis smiled and brought the teacups together with them. "For Tianwu, let's drink this cup together." Li Lao and Marquis drank tea, while Jiyan stuffed the meatballs in the bowl into his mouth, his cheeks bulging like a greedy squirrel. Li Lao and Mr. Ho couldn't help laughing. Soon after dinner and greetings from the family members, Mr. Ho and Jiyan followed Li Lao to the relief department. It has only been a few days, but the previously desolate and dilapidated relief agency has already changed its appearance. All the weeds in the yard were pulled out, and the ground was compacted. The few square flower beds that were occasionally left were surrounded by worn-out green bricks, and some ordinary but brightly blooming small flowers were planted there. Most of the houses have been rested and no longer leak. Although the paint on the doors and windows has peeled off and is still mottled, the window paper has been replaced with new ones. In every house, the doors and windows are wide open to take advantage of the midday sun and summer wind to drive away the darkness and humidity in the house. The rotten grass that was previously used as a bed has been cleared away and replaced by a newly built large kong, covered with golden kong mats. One after another, some children and old people came back from outside carrying hay or broken wood. They found them in dilapidated abandoned houses or remote places in the north of the city. They burn them at will at night to make some heat and make a big kong. It will keep you warm all night. There is no need to burn too much heat in summer, so everyone can have a good sleep. Everyone's clothes are still old and even a little dirty, but if you look closely, their hands and faces are washed, and their hair is combed as neatly as possible. The entire relief department seems to have been completely reborn because of a few flower beds, new window paper on the windows, the roof that no longer leaks, and the golden kong mat on the bed. But it seems that's not just because of that. Li Lauer led the Marquis and his niece around, and finally arrived outside the 3 rooms that served as the large kitchen. There were 2 trees not far away that provided good shade, so Zheng Feng and Zheng He placed their chairs here. The 2 of them were busy boiling tea and even picked up a box of snacks from somewhere. Ji Yan ate some snacks and thought about what else he could do to support the relief agency. She could see that the second uncle was very serious and working hard to change the relief department, not only for his career, but also to rescue these poor people from the sea of misery. Obviously, the Marquis also saw this and asked, "It is not a small matter to feed and clothe so many people. I'm afraid it won't be possible to just rely on the court to allocate money and food. Selling flowers to subsidize it is not a long-term solution." Li Lauer nodded and said, "I am going to repair some houses, separate them, and rent them out. Although the income is not much, it is enough to maintain all the houses on a daily basis. Find a few half-grown men from the village to be teachers and teach the children here simple arithmetic. They can study in the morning and do chores in the afternoon. After a year, these children can go out and become apprentices or boys. You can support yourself. For the rest of the people who are slightly disabled but can walk, I plan to let them sweep the streets. It is autumn soon, with fallen leaves flying everywhere, and heavy snow in winter. As long as they clean up, I will give each house along the street a few kilograms of food per month. It shouldn't be difficult. As for the elderly and sick, they can only stay at the relief department, weaving baskets and doing small jobs. This arrangement sounds very good. Although there will definitely be many problems encountered during the implementation process, at least a goal of being self-reliant has been set." Just as the Marquis was about to speak, several people suddenly walked in from outside the gate. They were all in ragged clothes and dirty, but they had smiles on their faces and yellow teeth. Perhaps smelling the aroma of rice porridge, a few of them squatted down in a sunny place, folding their sleeves, chatting and laughing from time to time, and occasionally took something out of their arms and pinched it. Ji Yan was stupid for a moment and didn't react. He wanted to take a closer look, but was blocked by the Marquis. Li Lauer looked bad and snorted coldly, "Master Ho, if there are any disabled veterans like Uncle Zhao and others who can walk around, they'd better be more aggressive. Send me about 20 people, over there at Baiwan Garden. It takes 4 to look after the home, but I'm afraid we need more than a dozen here." The Marquis understood and nodded in response, "Okay, I will select people for you when I get back. There are many disabled soldiers this time, and I am also worried about finding a place for them to resettle. Don't be too angry. There is such support everywhere, mud that doesn't go up the wall." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 566. Chapter 566. The best sister-in-law in the world. Li Lauer gritted his teeth angrily. It's true that the same rice feeds all kinds of people. Those seriously ill old people know how to struggle, sweep the yard, and burn a kong. These people are better off. They go out to wander during the day, and come back to eat and sleep when they are hungry. Do you really think this is his home? Having the heart of a bodhisattva, you can use thunderous tactics, the Marquis responded calmly. When it's time to show kindness, you must show kindness, but when it's time to establish your authority, you must also scare these people at once. Don't be afraid if something happens. I'm back, even if the sky falls, no one can touch the Li family. These words are really domineering. Although Li Lauer has no intention of killing everyone, he can't help but get excited. It feels so good to have someone to support you. And the good news is that he is already holding up a piece of snack and looking at his adoptive father. His eyes are full of adoring little stars. Noble status, handsome appearance, domineering, these are the standard features of the protagonist. It just so happens that such a good man doesn't want to get married yet, and there are so many effeminate people in Zindu who tear the veil behind their back. Mr. Ho felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by the little girl. He raised his hand and knocked her in confusion. Then, he said to Li Lauer, "We won the battle this time. The emperor was very happy and gave the tens of thousands of soldiers under my command the name of the Northern Expeditionary Army. All food, drink, clothing, and supplies must be given priority by the Ministry of War. In a few days, I will think of a way to distribute some small jobs such as shoes. You can lead people to do them well. Maybe one day I can get all the jobs. But it can't be done for the time being. The military supply business involves too many interests, and it can easily cause trouble for you and your family." "Okay, okay," Li Lauer was so happy that he nodded in agreement. He did not look down upon this little job at all. You know, tens of thousands of people have shoes. Even if they distribute a few thousand pairs, it will be enough for the young and old at the relief department to be busy for a month. This is a good start. If the news spreads, the relief department may receive other jobs in the future. After all, for the same amount of money, or even cheaper, you can do the work you need to do and do good deeds. Everyone is willing to give it a try, right?" After sitting for a while, the Marquis returned to Sujintan with the good news. Li Lauer stood in front of the door and did not turn back to the yard until the carriage was far away. An old man who was blind in one eye came out of the stove and said to Mr. Li with a smile, "Master Li, when the porridge is ready, when are you going to ring the bell? The relief department's yard is too big and there are too many houses. A bell must be rung every time a meal is served, so that people from all over the place will rush to line up when they hear the noise. If someone is really sick and unable to move, someone in the same room will take him back." Because money and food were limited, there were more than 700 people eating. So recently, the relief department has been serving 2 meals a day. Breakfast is served at 3 o'clock in the morning, and dinner is served in the middle of the afternoon. Li Lauer said, "Now that the porridge is ready, let's ring the bell." The old man hesitated for a moment, then quietly pointed to the lazy men under the wall and asked, "Sir, do they also want to give me porridge? Yesterday, they complained that the porridge was too thin, so they asked for an extra bowl. Moreover, the porridge sent to the patients at the back was also snatched away by them. It was really shameful. Not only that, they occupied a house and refused to let others live in it, but they also had others to cook the kong. No matter how much they took care of it, I'm afraid the relief department will have the final say." The old man didn't know whether he was angry or afraid that Li Lauer wouldn't care. His words sounded unpleasant both inside and outside. Li Lauer smiled and said calmly, "Go and do your work. I have my own arrangements." The blind old man laughed dryly and quickly responded and entered the kitchen. "I won't say how it was at the relief department. I just said that Marquis and Jiyan bought a lot of snacks on the way and returned to Sujintan. I happened to meet the naughty boys after school. When they saw Mr. Ho getting out of the car, they all rushed forward to salute. They all smiled in a coy and honest way, completely losing their usual naughty look. The Marquis was so funny that he guessed what they were thinking, so he gave them some snacks and told them, 'If you want to ride a horse, let my soldiers take you for a few laps, but you can't ride secretly, or you may break your leg. You know.' 'I know, thank you, Lord,' the boys shouted in unison, going crazy with joy. They took the snacks and ran home like crazy. They threw down their school bags and rushed to cut the freshest weeds, and then sent them to the family yard to bribe the war horses. When the war horses are full and happy, they will no longer reject them. They can ride on them for a while or help wash them. Jian doesn't have this hobby. She ran home long ago to hug her grandma's lap. Old Mrs. Li is taking Wenjuan to do needlework. Wenjuan may have just finished vomiting and is a little weak. Jian quickly broke off a piece of the sweet-scented Osman thus candy she bought and brought it to her sister-in-law. She then coaxed her and said, "Sister-in-law, my second brother is coming back to stay tonight, and just now he said he was going to the south of the city to buy you pickled plums." Sure enough, Wenjuan immediately opened her eyes and said angrily, "He is so busy and tired, and he still cares about what I am doing." Jian's eyes widened and she shouted, "Why can't I worry about her anymore? My sister-in-law is pregnant with my second brother's child. It's such a hard work, so of course my second brother should be nicer to my sister-in-law." When Juan's face turned redder, she hugged her sister-in-law, tidied her slightly messy hair, and finally said to Mrs. Li, "Grandma, do you know that when I married into our family, I was most happy to have Fu Niuer, my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law will try her best to steal things from her sister-in-law, beg for money, and will go to her mother-in-law to complain if nothing happens. Our Fu Niuer not only doesn't do this, but also provides clothes and jewelry for my sister-in-law, and even has a small business to make money. Ever since I became pregnant, she has treated me like a baby. Grandma, I almost woke up laughing in my dreams. If I tell you such a thing, others will probably turn red with envy." When Mrs. Li heard her granddaughter being praised, her heart felt sweeter than honey. She couldn't help but echoed, "This girl is a born sensible child. When she was born, our family was fleeing from famine on the road. There were so many suffer. This child never cried once even when she was very hungry at night. She didn't cry, she just felt sorry for her mother who was tired during the day and wanted her mother and the rest of the family to sleep a little longer. Tell me, whose child is like this? How can the whole family not feel sorry for her?" Hearing the good news, he blushed and hurried over to hug his grandma's neck, acting cute and cute. "Grandma taught me everything. Fu Niu learned it from her. Oh, grandma's fat girl is the best at making grandma happy." Mrs. Li smiled happily and turned to see Mr. Ho come in. She remembered the half-carriage of fabrics that had just been sent from the city and said quickly, "Master Ho, why did you send so many things to my family again? If you need it at home, just go and buy it, but it's not good to always let you suffer. Auntie, we are all part of the same family. We can't talk about taking advantage of others." Mr. Ho sat next to the old lady and said with a smile, "You also know that there are no women in my house, so those materials are lying around in vain, and we have to worry about insects. It's moldy, why not take it all and use it?" Old Mrs. Li had no choice but to respond, "Hey, okay, in a few days, Hong Ying will lead the women in the village to bake mooncakes. When the time comes, let them bake more and send them over. Don't buy extra from the Ho mansion. Yes, you know. Okay, Aunt. You don't need to tell anyone else about this. Just tell Fu Niuer. I left the Ho mansion to her today. From now on, I will ask her to go to the city every few days and visit the Ho mansion." The Marquis said it casually, and he didn't think it was shocking to leave such a large Marquis mansion to a child. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 567. Chapter 567. The reason for being different. Old Mrs. Li is okay. In her heart, her granddaughter is a little fairy who can do anything, so it doesn't matter if she helps the Marquis take care of the Marquis's mansion. Wenjuan was very surprised. "How old is your sister-in-law? How can Master Ho feel relieved?" Aren't you afraid that the home mansion will be messed up? But she didn't dare to say this. After chatting a few more words, the Marquis was going to see Dr. Zhang, so of course he had to follow the good news. After running around for a day, Mr. Ho was afraid that the fat girl would be tired, so he crouched down and carried her on his back, and then went all the way to the back of the village. I don't know what the Marquis said, but Jiyan kept giggling, kicking his legs, and spreading laughter in and outside the courtyard. The small adobe house in the north of the village has since become the base of Divine Dr. Zhang, and no strangers are allowed to approach it. No, even cats, dogs, and even flies and mosquitoes are unwilling to come close. After all, the strong smell of medicine in the courtyard can make them dizzy at any time. Maybe they will fall down accidentally and be crushed. The coarse cloth clothes and trousers worn by Divine Dr. Zhang were originally gray, but they were stained with a lot of concoction, and now their true appearance is no longer visible. His hair is messy and his beard is knotted. He hasn't slept well for days and nights. His eye circles are as dark as those of a giant panda, and the bags under his eyes almost hang to his chest. At this moment, he was squatting at the door of the rabbit cage, pulling his hair and chattering. What's going on? It should be easy to use, but why isn't it working? It's been 3 days. The swelling should have subsided, but it's not as good as ordinary gold sore medicine. I'm so angry. Hearing the courtyard door being pushed open, he looked over with blood-red eyes and yelled, "Didn't I say no one is allowed in? Get out." Halfway through his words, he realized that it was Mr. Ho and Jiyan who came in, so he reluctantly changed his words, "Why are you here? I'm busy and I don't have time to treat you." The Marquis has known him for many years and knows his temper very well, so he doesn't care about him. He said, "What medicine can't be figured out? Besides seeing a doctor, can't I come and see you when I have nothing to do?" Jiyan also jumped off Mr. Ho's back, stepped forward with a smile and pulled the sleeve of the miracle Dr. Zhang. "Grandpa Zhang, my adoptive father bought roast chicken in the city. Can you come to my house for dinner tonight?" Dr. Zhang wanted to rub the little girl's hair, but then remembered that he had just touched the rabbit, so he hurriedly went to find water to wash his hands, and casually greeted the Marquis, "Sit wherever you like." The Marquis took Jiyan and sat under the eaves on the west side of the house. This is upwind, so you can't smell the smell of medicine and small animal excrement that fills the yard. Jiyan couldn't help but become curious when she saw Dr. Zhang washing his hands and changing his clothes. You must know that this old man is extremely casual with everyone, but he is different with the Marquis, and this difference does not seem to be because of the noble status of the Marquis. She asked in a low voice, "Father, how did you and Grandpa Zhang meet?" Master Ho's expression paused, but he returned to normal in an instant. Jiyan immediately felt that she shouldn't ask this question. Just when she wanted to take it back, the Marquis spoke. "My parents and relatives all died from the epidemic at that time. Dr. Zhang was one of the doctors responsible for diagnosis and treatment. I was not much older than you at that time, and I asked him if he could cure my parents in order to coax me. He agreed, but perhaps he feels guilty after traveling abroad for so many years. His medical skills have become better and better, and he has not forgotten to come back to Kyoto to see me often. Later I accidentally got a cough, and he was always helping me with the diagnosis and treatment. Without Dr. Zhang, I'm afraid I would have died a long time ago, and I would have no chance of living long enough to stay at your house." Hearing the good news, my heart was filled with panic. Even though the adoptive father smiled when he talked about this, how frightening it must be for a child to suddenly lose his parents and relatives. I don't know how much suffering this has caused over the years. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say. In the end, she could only hug her adoptive father's arm and pat his shoulder. Fu Niuer will definitely be kind to Grandpa Zhang in the future. Without Grandpa Zhang, Fu Niuer would have no adoptive father. Divine Dr. Zhang happened to come out of the room. When he heard this, he stared and laughed and cursed, "You heartless girl, I am your master, you should be filial, but you are treating me well because of Master Ho." Jian stuck out her tongue and quickly changed her words, "Grandpa Zhang, can I add a plate of fried fish to you tonight? That one is the most delicious when you drink it." "Humph, this little girl knows how to flatter her." Dr. Zhang nodded her forehead, looked at the rabbit in the cage, and frowned again. When the Marquis saw him like this, he said, "Fu Niuer, go and pour a bowl of water for your foster father." Jian guessed that they had something to say, so he got up and ran into the kitchen. It's a pity that Dr. Zhang didn't have any warm water to boil, so Jian could only scoop half a bowl out of the water tank. After waiting for a while, she took it out. As a result, as soon as he arrived under the eaves of the corridor, Dr. Zhang hurriedly came over to greet him. The old man no longer had the frown on his face just now, and his face was almost blooming with smiles. He took the water bowl and threw it aside, shouting, "Oh, oh, our Fu Niuer is the princess, how can we work? Sit down quickly, sit down quickly." Jian blinked twice and looked at the smiling adoptive father. She didn't understand what kind of magic he used to make Dr. Zhang change his temperament. You know, the last time she helped grind the medicine powder, her palms were blistered, and the old man didn't say a word. "The county owner, is it easy to use, is it still a time period?" Master Ho was amused by the fat girl's confused look and blinked at her twice quickly. He understood the good news, sat down, and began to make conditions. "Grandpa Zhang, I have memorized that medical book. Can I learn how to prepare medicine? After all, I have just started learning, and I don't need particularly good prescriptions. I only need hemostatic medicine and antidote. My second uncle will give it to me. A lot of medicinal materials were sent back, I want to try them." "Okay," Dr. Zhang agreed immediately. He even immediately found a pen and paper to write down the prescription. He handed it directly to Jian and asked, "What else do you want to learn? Just tell me." Jian shook his head, "No need, Grandpa Zhang, these two are enough for me to think about." The Marquis also said, "The ground will be broken in a few days and a new courtyard will be built here. Fu Niuer will bring the medicinal materials and think about it together with Dr. Zhang. He can also teach on the spot." "Okay, listen to your adoptive father." Jian smiled cutely. The Marquis stood up to say goodbye. Dr. Zhang ran to get another medical book. He handed it to Jian without any hesitation and said, "Go back and memorize this book. I will train you as a disciple within half a year." "Half a year? Happy news, studying medicine is not just about eating. How can it be so simple?" But the adoptive father did not speak, and she pretended not to understand and responded vaguely. After finally leaving the small mud house, Jian immediately started asking. The Marquis then said, "I told divine Dr. Zhang that when he teaches you as a disciple, I will tell him, who is the master who cured my cough." Jian was stunned for a moment, then laughed, "Don't worry, foster father, you don't have to worry about this matter. I will let Grandpa Zhang know who the master is in the future." The Marquis also smiled and said, "Shen Dr. Zhang is very trustworthy and has no utilitarianism, so he can be trusted. Of course, at any time, the most trustworthy person is only yourself, do you understand?" "I know, foster father." The good news was answered immediately, and the elder and the younger held hands and went home happily. Sure enough, it's just like what Mr. Ho said. Early in the morning of the second day, just as the Li family was having dinner, Dr. Zhang came to see Jian and asked her how she was memorizing the medical books. He also said that he would take her to diagnose the pulse of the villagers today and get familiar with her as soon as possible. Jian hadn't even had a few bites of rice before she was dragged away by Dr. Zhang. Her two pigtails were flying in the wind. People who didn't know better thought they were robbing the child. It was like this for 3 or 4 days in a row, which made Mrs. Lee feel sorry for her granddaughter. So, after lunch that day, Ji-Yun went to take a nap, and the courtyard door was pushed open again. Old Mrs. Lee thought Dr. Jong was coming and rushed out immediately, wanting to persuade her granddaughter to sleep a little longer. As a result, it was Lee Laosi and several others who came in from outside the hospital, followed by a young daughter-in-law holding a parcel. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 568. Chapter 568 What a bully. Li Laosi was afraid that my mother would be worried, so he quickly stepped forward to support her and said, "Mom, we are back." Ernio's wife has nothing to do, so she also came to stay for a while. After getting married, I came out and walked around. I still have to stay in a small residence. No one has this rule. Mrs. Lee guessed that the matter was not that simple, but this was not the time to talk, so she smiled and said, "Okay, welcome. All the children at home have gone to school, and it is too deserted on weekdays. Ernio's daughter-in-law will live there more. It'll only take a few days, so you can keep me company, an old lady." Wei Ernio quickly grabbed his daughter-in-law, Xiao Kui'er, and stepped forward to salute and thank him. "Thank you, madam, we have bothered you." "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Lee patted him on the shoulder, then held Xiao Kui'er's hand with a smile and said, "My child, Niu and my fourth child have a lifelong friendship. They are not real brothers, but we are closer than real brothers. You live here as your own home, and we will talk about it later." Little Kui'er's eyes were red, and her eyes were partly aggrieved and partly frightened. She cautiously said, "Madam, I'm not lazy. I can work. If you have any work, just call me." "Okay." Old Mrs. Lee understood the child's anxiety, so she responded with great joy, "Don't worry, the autumn harvest is coming soon, and there is a lot of work at home. Then help me clean up the vegetable garden." As expected, Xiao Kui'er grinned and said, "Auntie, I can pickle pickles. The pickles I pickle are said to be delicious by the whole village. I will help you pickle more." "Okay, it's settled." Mrs. Lee shook her hand and greeted everyone. "I'll take Xiaokui and Ernio to settle down. You follow the fourth to wash your hands and faces. There's a lot of steam in the house in the morning. Bayazai, I'll warm you up later." "Thank you, madam," everyone responded one after another and turned around to go to the next yard. When Li Yong and Hui Niang heard the news, they came over with their children in their arms. The fever of the twins was gone. After eating and drinking for 2 days, they regained their energy. Now one was pulling his father's hair mischievously, and the other was swaying in his mother's arms. Everyone liked it so much that they couldn't help but come up to hug her and tease her. Hui Niang also wondered why Wei Ernio had brought his daughter-in-law. When she heard that they were going to stay at Li's house, Hui Niang said, "Auntie, there are many people coming and going at your house, and the people in the front and backyards are also troublesome, so why not let Ernio and Xiao Kui'er live in my house? Niu and Daong go to the dock on weekdays. It would be great to have little Kui'er as my companion." Li Yong also said, "Yes, and it is more convenient for them to live in our house." Wei Ernio also knew that the Li family sincerely wanted to keep them, but in such a big courtyard, where all distinguished guests came and went, they would indeed feel more comfortable in Li Yong's place. So he took his wife to pay homage to Mrs. Lee and went to Li Yong's house. Mrs. Lee didn't stop her and said, "You can live wherever you feel comfortable. Let's take a rest today. Tomorrow, we'll cook more good dishes at home. You all can come and eat. Let's have a good time." Everyone joked for a while. Huanayang and Li Yong put the child down, and took Wei Ernio and his wife back. Ji-Yun woke up from his nap, washed his face and went to the front yard, where he saw the twins sitting on the mat under the eaves of the corridor. The 2 fat children were given nicknames by the village chief. The boy was named Ping Ping and the girl was named Anan. At this moment, each of them held a fruit and were gnawing happily. The fruit is peeled and scored with some lines to ensure that the two children can taste it without choking themselves if they bite off too big a piece. Orange Mrs. Lee was sitting next to her, teasing the two fat children from time to time. Steam was rising in the stove, making steamed buns and rice porridge. Ji-Yun came forward, kissed the twins, then hugged Grandma's arm and asked, "Grandma, why are you cooking at this time, and why is Ping Anan here too?" Mrs. Lee told Wei Erniu that he had brought his daughter-in-law here, and the little flame of gossip in Ji-Yun's heart immediately started to burn brightly. "Milk, what's going on? Didn't Uncle Erniu just get married? Why did he bring his wife out to live with him?" Li Lauer hit his granddaughter and said angrily, "You are young, don't be like the talkative woman in the village. If your parents are short-sighted, there is nothing you don't want to know." He. Ji-Yun giggled and quickly made an excuse, "Uncle Erniu saved Daddy, and I care about Uncle Erniu too." Just as he was talking, Madame Hui came. She also knew that Mrs. Lee was concerned about her, so she took the initiative to speak up without waiting for questioning. "Auntie, the Wei family is not authentic. Erniu is a simple and honest man. He has worked a lot since he was a child, but he is not as good at coaxing people as his brother, so the family favors his brother. The wife his brother married was the daughter of a cloth shop owner. Xiao Kui was an orphan in the village who was taken in by the Wei family and was given as a child bride to Erniu. In the past few years, brother Erniu and his wife have lived in the county town, but they have had to ask for food and drink from their families. Erniu's salary has been given to his brother by his parents. As a result, little Kui worked as a cow and horse in the Wei family, and was beaten and scolded. And not enough food and clothing. Erniu didn't know this until they returned to their hometown to get married this time, and the banquet hosted by the Wei family was very shabby, and no wedding clothes were prepared for Xiao Kui. Erniu's mother took the fabrics and jewelry we gave her and gave them to her sister-in-law, saying that she would support her old age with her family and not count on Erniu. Erniu wants to take Xiao Kui to live alone, but they still don't agree. They want to keep Xiao Kui at home as a cow and horse, and drive Erniu to continue to earn wages. This is too bullying. Mrs. Lee was furious when she heard that. The palms and backs of the hands are all flesh, but they are their own children. The old couple of the Wei family must have been fooled by lard. Not to mention the boss, reliable or not, even if Erniu and Xiaokui are so filial and sensible, they can't be bullied like this. Yes, Madame Hui also sighed and whispered, "This family is just like the Yan family, they are so cruel." "What are Erniu's plans?" Mrs. Lee frowned. "If you are partial to your children, you will not be able to help them. This old couple is counting on their eldest brother to support them in their old age, but they may not be able to count on it. Maybe they will look for Erniu in the future." Huanayang nodded and replied, "I heard from Xiaokui that Erniu has to go back. His second uncle passed away early and there is no one to inherit the incense. Erniu wants to inherit the name of his second uncle, but his parents can't count on him in the future. Brother, if you find him here, he is also a cousin. Even if he is not at home, Xiaokui will not be bullied too much by his parents." "This is also a good idea." Mrs. Lee's eyes lit up. "They say that all parents in the world have a filial piety. But when you encounter such a parent, you are also unlucky. Please leave a note for yourself. It's a good way out." Xiao Kui seems to be a diligent and responsible girl. The old Wei family will be really in trouble in the future. As long as they live in peace, Xiao Kui won't leave them without a solution. The two of them were chatting lively, but Ji-Yun was worried and worried. "There is no other reason than that I can't bear to part with it." The set of jewelry she gave her was to thank Uncle Erniu for saving her father, not for greedy wolves like the Wei family. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 569. Chapter 569. The sister wants to eat people. She thought for a moment and then said, "Nah, when Uncle Ernie goes back, ask someone to follow him and get that set of jewelry back. Just say that the jewelry is a reward from the queen in the palace. It can be given to the wives of the heroes of the northern expedition. It cannot be given to outsiders, otherwise it will be disrespectful." These words reminded Mrs. Li and Hui Niang, and Hui Niang immediately said, "Yes, and those fabrics, please bring them back to make clothes for Xiaoqui. Just now I saw that she had brought a change of clothes in her package, and there were still patches piled on top of each other. The Wei family is so harsh, it's so heartless." Old Mrs. Li frowned and was a little worried about who to send. It happened that Grandma He came out of the backyard. After listening to a few words, she stepped forward and introduced herself. "Old madam, miss, let me go. The one next to me won't work. He's pretty good at scaring people." "Oh, that's right." Jian jumped up happily, hugged Grandma He's arm, and shouted with a smile, "Grandma is originally from the palace. She will definitely scare the Wei family to death if she puts on airs." "The old witch." "Don't talk nonsense," Mrs. Li glared and slapped her granddaughter. At the end, she said, "It's appropriate for Nanny He to step forward in this matter, but we have to wait. I'll ask the fourth child to ask Ernie. If Ernie doesn't want to do it, we would like to help him out of kindness, but we will end up bullying his parents instead." Everyone nodded. Hui Niang carried her fat son on her back and her fat girl in her arms, wanting to go home. Mrs. Li went to the kitchen to pick up steamed buns for her and asked her to take them back to feed Xiaoqui. Jian took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, secretly poking and teasing the two fat children, and secretly took several bites on their tender lotus-like calves. Two fat children were frightened and didn't understand why the sister was eating their legs. They kicked their little feet desperately, trying to escape from the claws of the leg-gnawing monster. Huanyang felt something was wrong. She lowered her head and saw that Jian was nibbling her son and then her daughter. She was so angry that she couldn't laugh or cry, and said angrily, "You girl, you chewed the feet of two younger brothers and sisters when you were a child, and now you bite the legs. You have really grown up." Jian bared her teeth and kept laughing, and she embarrassedly pulled the fat girl's skirt to cover her face. Hui Niang patted her and asked, "Have you finished sewing the veil I gave you the day before yesterday? Show it to me tonight." Jian suddenly had a bitter look on her face. Recently, Dr. Zhang had been asking her for various quick fixes. How could she have time to sew a veil? Old Mrs. Li came out with her buns. Seeing her granddaughter's sad face, she couldn't stop laughing after asking about it. Huanyang took her daughter and son and left with the buns. Jian spent the entire afternoon struggling with the veil. No matter how careful he was, there were still a few pinpricks on his fingers. At dusk, Mr. Ho came back from the city. As soon as he entered the yard, he saw Wei Ernie and several others smiling and surrounding him. He guessed that they were busy, so he waved his hand and went to wash and change clothes first, and then called them to come forward to talk. In the yard next door, Tao Hongying went to Xianqi today to make private dishes, and took Wenjuan with her to relax. When the two of them came back, they simply brought a few dishes from the restaurant, cooked porridge at home with some pickles, steamed some steamed buns, and dinner was ready. It's rare that Li Lao came back today, sitting under the eaves and talking to Li Lao Si. But no matter how long they waited, they still didn't see Mr. Marquis coming, so Li Lao Si went next door to invite someone. At this time, Mr. Ho finally came over. The whole family gathers together, regardless of gender, to have a lively meal together. After eating and drinking, Mr. Ho talked about business with Mrs. Li, Mr. Li, and Mr. Li. "Auntie, there is a second village to be built at the archway intersection. Can you allocate more land? Ernio and his wife want to settle here in the future, and the other guards also have the idea of settling here. First of all, they are my most trustworthy personal guards. Every time I come back, they will follow me here. It is more convenient to reunite with my wife and children here than going back to my hometown. Secondly, there are many old people and children in our village now, there are too few young people. But valleys, orchards, and melon fields are all treasure troves. You must always be on guard against others tampering, and having more hands is also beneficial. I want to select 100 or 10 soldiers from the disabled soldiers from this expedition to settle in the second village. They all have pension money, and I will subsidize some more and build some row houses for them to live in. When there is work in the village, they work. If there is no work, they patrol. When the village is no longer busy, we can find other ways to make a living for them. Hearing the excitement, Li Lao nodded repeatedly. This is great, there are indeed too few young people in the village. The third brother brought a few people to Luoan, and the people working in the village were a little short of resources. I want to find some boys to take to the relief department to help, and my eldest brother also wants to send some people to Quanzhou, but I don't dare to say anything. I'm afraid that too many people will be sent out like this, and no one will check the passports of the elderly and children in the village. Now it's good now, we have more than 100 people, but we don't have to worry about that anymore. Yes, Mrs. Li agreed, the boys in the village are getting older and older, but they don't dare to go out to see the world. Now they are better. After saying that, she called Zhang Feng to ask for the village chief and head Lu. Nowadays, Li Lao is not often in the village. Everything in and outside the village is handled by the village chief and Lu Baiatu. Suddenly they heard that the Marquis was going to add more people to them, and the two of them went crazy with joy. The village chief waved his pipe and pot and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha, Old Wei and the others can be saved. Old Zhao and the others went to Baiwan Garden, and Old Wei didn't even have anyone to replace the patrol. It's only been a few days, and the circles under his eyes are as if they were smeared with ink. From now on, there will be people who will listen to his leadership and his arrangements. Lu Baiatu was also excited, seeing that the fruits on the mountain are about to be picked. We have to build 2 villages, and we have to go up the mountain to cut firewood. There is too much work. There are not many manpower, and the boys are still worried about going to Quanzhou with the fleet. My hair is so worried that my hair has turned gray. The Marquis has saved my life. The more manpower, the better. The Marquis nodded and said with a smile, for the time being, let's arrange for 100 people and Wei Ernio and the dozen or so people to live in the second village. Also see how they behave. If there are any bad ones, just kick them out. Don't worry. I'm here. The opportunity has been given to them, and the way out has been arranged for them. If they don't cherish it, it's no one else's fault. Sure, Lord Marquis, don't worry. We know it well. It's really detrimental to the village, and we won't be polite. After all, the villagers, young and old, can't ruin a pot of soup just because of a donkey dung egg. The village chief deserves to be happy. At that time, the Marquis gave Lu Baiatu 500 taels of silver notes to advance the cost of building row houses for the wounded soldiers. 100 wounded soldiers will need at least 10 row houses. There are 3 rooms in a row house, divided into east and west rooms. One room is spacious enough for 5 people to live in it. As Jiyan listened to the excitement, he always felt that this was like a farmhouse B&B in his previous life. And Wei Ernio had already gotten married, and most of his guards were raising their families. They couldn't live in a row house, so they had to build a yard. But how to build it specifically needs to be discussed between them and Lu Baiatu. Everyone had said the same thing, so they dispersed to rest. Of course, the good news can't rest. It's still time to enter the space and start the academic master mode. On the second day, Lu Baiatu took Wei Ernio and others to the archway to look at the place, and the villagers knew that they were going to settle down. Even everyone knows that more than 100 disabled soldiers will soon come to settle down. The village immediately became lively and everyone was talking about this matter. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 570. Chapter 570, I won't discuss arresting you. The broken gold beach came into existence from scratch, from everyone being able to step on it, to now no one dares to lift a finger when holding the cornucopia. It can be said that most of it is due to the Marquis. It is Mr. Ho who is intimidating Xiao Xiao, and it is Mr. Ho who is supporting everyone. Now, the Marquis arranges for people to come over, how can the villagers object? Besides, who do everyone hate the most, that is the barbarians. Not to mention being chased by barbarians, fleeing all the way, and leaving their hometown. Let's talk about the fright at the dock. Almost everyone in the village was injured, and the entire village was almost wiped out. By killing the barbarians, these soldiers are avenging them. They are heroes. How could they be unwilling to accept it and turn away benefactors and heroes? Especially the young guys, they can't wait to jump with joy. They want to go around the city, visit Luoan, take a big boat to see the sea, and see the people with yellow hair and red eyes. But the family always said that no one was doing the work in the village and they were not allowed to leave. Now that they have enough manpower, there is no reason for anyone to stop them from flying high. Li Laosi found an opportunity to talk to Wei Erniu about begging for something. Wei Erniu is honest, but not stupid. This time the family really hurt his heart. He didn't hesitate and said directly, "Brother Li, I agree to take back the jewelry and fabrics. It's not that I'm unfilial. It's that all the wages and rewards I have earned before will be given to you. The family is already enough to repay their kindness of giving birth. But Xiao Kui I never bought her a piece of cloth. Instead, she suffered so much at home because of me, and now she gets nothing from getting married to me. I feel guilty. Those fabrics and jewelry were given to Xiaoqui by the old lady, the princess, and Daong's sister-in-law. They should belong to Xiaoqui. I am helpless. Seeing my mother cheating and trying to hang herself, I have no choice. It would be better if the old lady can send someone to ask for it back. Even if I don't come back, I will kowtow to the old lady and say thank you." Li Laosi patted him and comforted him, "Don't be sad, the 5 fingers are not as long as they are. We are outside all year round and cannot be filial to our parents. Parents will almost always be partial. I think the brothers are not very happy these days. Maybe every family is in the same situation, otherwise they wouldn't ask the Marquis to settle here. Don't think too much about it. From now on, brothers will live together and have a lively life. When we go out, we will take care of each other at home." Wei Erniu turned his head, wiped his eyes, and nodded heavily. On the second day, when the village vigorously began to purchase wood to build the second village, Wei Erniu and several brothers set off while guarding the Li family's carriage. In the carriage were Grandma He and Shui Ling, starting their debt collection journey. Let's not talk about how busy and lively the broken gold beach is. Just in Zindu, at the Genkuo Duke's mansion, the crown prince, who had just woken up from a hangover, yawned and had dark circles under his eyes, and walked crookedly to the main courtyard to pay his respects to his father and mother. The Duke of Zhen couldn't see his son's carefree behavior, so he got angry on the spot. "You came over to say hello after breakfast was finished. Whose rule is this? Where were you wandering last night? You are in your 20s, and you are not good at writing or fighting. What do you think a useless person like you can do in the future?" The prince's ears were ringing with these words, and he didn't care at all. He picked his ears and responded with a smile, "Of course I'm waiting to become the duke of the country." "You traitor, you are expecting me to die early." Genkuo Gong blew his beard and glared angrily, and was about to find something to beat his son. As a result, as expected, he was stopped by the duke's wife again. "Okay, Okay. It's filial piety for the child to come to greet me. If you don't praise me a few times, just scold him from head to toe. No wonder the child doesn't want to come over. After saying that, she called her son to come forward and ask about the cold and warmth. The prince's eyes were a little impatient, but he still coaxed his mother for a few words, and finally asked, "Mother, have you been a guest at the Jiangning Marquis mansion? Have you met Miss Billion?" The duke's wife was in a dilemma and prevaricated, "I have had a headache these past few days and I haven't gone yet. In a few days the chrysanthemums will bloom and there will be a flower viewing party at home. I will post a message asking Mrs. Ho to come over and ask a few questions." "Mother," the prince was annoyed and started making a fuss at that time. "You said the same thing last time. When exactly will you go to the Marquis mansion to propose marriage? I will never marry anyone other than Miss Billion in my life, otherwise I will let the Duke's mansion cut off all my descendants." This is an unpleasant thing to say. It was difficult for the Duke of the State to have heirs. He had one wife and 5 concubines. He only got such a son when he was in his 40s. Now the son actually said that he wanted to annihilate his descendants. The Duke could no longer bear it any longer and shouted to the steward, "Bring me the whip." The housekeeper hesitated to move, afraid to go. However, the prince was not afraid. Instead, he mocked, "Father, don't bother me. Can you swing the whip? Be careful," and you ducked. The Duke of Guo was so angry that he almost rolled his eyes, which provoked the Duke and his wife to rush over. She felt sorry for her son and was reluctant to leave her husband, so she could only chase him away. "You can go quickly. You can go wherever you want to play. Don't be irritating at home." The prince was so heartless that he turned around and walked out without even looking at his parents. His 2 attendants and young men hurriedly followed behind, smiling and giving their master advice on where to play today. It's a pity that the prince's mind is full of girls he can't fall in love with, and he can't be interested in anything. As soon as the 3 of them walked out of the house, 7 or 8 officials from Jingzayin came towards them. As soon as the 2 parties met each other, the official asked, "Is the Crown Prince of Zhenqiu praying for good years?" The prince is used to being a wealthy and powerful person, and anyone who sees him will treat him like a prince. At this moment, he suddenly heard his name being called, and he felt a little uncomfortable. He was stunned for a moment, then glared, "You are so brave, you dare to even shout my prince's name." He wanted to speak again, but those officials suddenly came forward, broke his arms, ropes, and in the blink of an eye, they dragged him away like a young pig. Chang Sui and the young man were startled and tried to grab someone, but were kicked to the ground by the officer. Fortunately, they were not completely stupid, so they hurriedly crawled back to report the news to their master. In the backyard, the Duke of Guo had just calmed down and was still thinking about how to teach his son a lesson when he suddenly heard that his son had been arrested by Jingzayin's officials. He still couldn't believe it. What's going on? What did Brother Nian do? He stood up immediately, not caring about his illness. This time it was the Duke's wife's turn to faint. She was pinched and woke up. Her first words were, "My son, why were you arrested? This is going to cost me my life." Mr. Guo's mind was buzzing. He smashed the teacup hard to stop his wife from crying, and then he ordered, "I'll go to Jingzayin to have a look. You wait for the news at home." The Duke's wife regained consciousness, but she was also afraid that if the Duke fell again, no one would be able to save her son, so she nodded quickly. The Duke of Guo kept his spirits up and hurried to the Jingzhou mansion office and handed over a note asking to see the governor. Unfortunately, it took a long time after the post was submitted before Fuyin's senior master came out and said that Fuyin was busy and had no time to entertain the Duke. Even a fool knows something is wrong now. The Duke of Guo personally took the master aside and stuffed him with 200 taels of banknotes. He finally knew why his son was arrested. He was so shocked that he didn't want to believe it. It's impossible isn't the case already closed. End of this chapter.